The Amish are known for leading a very simple lifestyle, free from most of the trappings of modern society. As a deeply devout Christian denomination, many Amish traditions can be traced to their strong religious beliefs. But that is not the whole story. They have fascinating norms, traditions, and customs that have been handed down from one generation to the next. Just like any other cultural group, some of their traditions have been shaped by external influences. One of the most shocking events is what occurs on the wedding night. To better understand any culture, it's wise to look at some of its traditions. So, join us as we go through Amish traditions that are sure to take you by surprise. Clothing. The Amish are known for their plain attire. Men wear solid-colored shirts, broad-brimmed hats, and suits that signify similarity amongst one another. Amish men grow beards to symbolize manhood and marital status, as well as to promote humility. They are forbidden from growing mustaches because mustaches are seen by the Amish as being affiliated with the military, to which they are strongly opposed, due to their pacifist beliefs. Women have similar guidelines on how to dress, which are also expressed in the Ordnung, the Amish version of legislation. They are to wear calf-length dresses, and muted colors along with bonnets and aprons. Prayer caps and bonnets are worn by the women because they are a visual representation of their religious beliefs and promote unity through the tradition of every woman wearing one. The color of the bonnet signifies whether a woman is single or married. Single women wear black bonnets and married women wear white. The color coding of bonnets is important because women are not allowed to wear jewelry, such as wedding rings, as it is seen as drawing attention to the body, which can induce pride in the individual. All clothing is sewn by hand, but the way to fasten the garment widely depends on whether the Amish person is a part of the New Order or Old Order Amish. The Old Order Amish seldom, if ever, use buttons because they are seen as too flashy. Instead, they use the hook and eye approach to fashion clothing or metal snaps. The New Order Amish are slightly more progressive and allow the usage of buttons to help attire clothing. This isn't even one of the most confusing traditions. Beards with no mustaches. All Amish men, upon getting married, are expected to grow beards. They are prohibited from shaving them, and this has become one of their most distinguishing traits. This, too, can be traced to biblical texts regarding men's beards. But why don't they have mustaches? Did the Bible prohibit them? No, the reason for sporting full beards without mustaches is due to something entirely different. The Amish are pacifists. Thus, they've never, nor will they ever, been associated with the military. Violence in any form is strictly forbidden, and that means the military, as a vehicle for war, must be avoided. Until 1916, British military soldiers were required to grow mustaches. In the British-occupied years preceding the American Revolution, they didn't take kindly to conscientious objectors like the Amish. To distance themselves from this fashion that became synonymous with war, the Amish chose not to wear mustaches with their beards. Keep watching for more surprising facts. Amish baptism. Amish youth decide if they want to join the church in their late teens and early 20s, and if they choose to be baptized, they submit themselves to the order of the church for the rest of their lives. In doing so, candidates make a confession of faith and agree to comply with the order of the Amish community, or the Ordnung, an unwritten tradition that spells out expected behaviors and regulations. Church members who break the commitment and refuse to repent and confess their sins are excommunicated and shunned. The Pennsylvania Amish try to persuade the wayward to cooperate with the church, but those who continue to be disobedient must be banned from fellowship in order to maintain the purity of the church. The shunned are prohibited from engaging in any social interaction and are cut off from all close friends and associates. Shunning happens infrequently, although it serves as an effective form of social control for the Amish that preserves their spiritual purity. Ministers. What about their ministers? Selection of Amish ministers. Each district usually has 2 or 3 ministers, 1 deacon, and 1 bishop, who is typically shared between 2 districts. The Pennsylvania Amish do not believe in going to a religious college or seminary to become a minister in the church. No one is brought in, or feels he has been called to serve as a preacher. Rather, ministers are chosen by lot from the men in the Amish church district congregation. Deacons are chosen by lot as well, and bishops from among the ministers. Becoming a minister is not viewed as an honor, but rather as a serious and heavy responsibility. Ministers usually serve for life and receive no salary. In most Amish communities, a young man cannot be baptized into the faith unless he is willing to become a minister, should the lot fall on him someday. It is normally taken for granted that the candidate will be a married man. New ministers are needed when one dies, or when a district becomes too large and must divide. The actual event of choosing a new minister is considered one of the most emotional and important to be experienced in the Amish religion. An announcement that a new minister will be chosen is usually made at least 2 weeks prior to the communion service, so everyone has time to pray and meditate. There are not to be discussions among the people as to who they plan to nominate, nor does anyone indicate his desire to become a minister. Voting is completed by the congregation after the communion service, and those who receive 3 or more votes are named the candidates. Each candidate selects a hymnal, and the one who finds a slip of paper with a verse written on it tucked inside is deemed the one chosen by God from among the congregation. With such a large community, deaths often occur. How do they handle that? Funeral preparations. Funeral practices of the Lancaster Amish settlement differ somewhat from those in other areas. In Lancaster County, an Amish body is taken to a local funeral director who is familiar with Amish funeral customs. Family members might wash the body before the undertaker arrives. The undertaker embalms the body and typically dresses it in long underwear before placing it in the coffin. Coffins are 6-sided, with 2 pieces on hinges that fold down to reveal the body from the chest up, and lined with material made and provided by the Amish. The coffin is then returned to the Amish family. The body is usually dressed in white clothing by family members of the same sex. For men, this means white pants, a vest, and a shirt. For women, a white dress, cape, and apron. In many cases, the white cape and apron are the same that were worn on a woman's wedding day. What happens next? Sermons and burial. What happens next? In the meantime, word goes out about the death to relatives and those in the church district, and an obituary appears in the local newspaper. Prior to the day of the funeral service and burial, usually 3 days after the death, friends and neighbors come to the home to view the body. This is a somber time, with men and women dressed in black, quietly sitting in 1 or 2 rooms. Visitors greet the family members and then are asked if they would like to see the body. They are taken to the coffin, and the white sheet or cloth is pulled back to reveal the face of the deceased. The undertaker does not use makeup or cosmetics on the face when he embalms the body. On the day of the funeral, a religious service is held in the home. During the sermons, ministers refrain from eulogizing the deceased. Instead, they tend to reference the story of creation. Following the religious service, buggies will process to the cemetery, and because there are so many, a number designating the order is often written in chalk on the side. The coffin is placed in the hearse, a box-like enclosed carriage drawn by a horse. The long line of carriages heading to the cemetery is a solemn, impressive sight. There are about 20 Amish cemeteries in Lancaster County, with gravestones that are fairly uniform stating the name, birth date, death date, and age in years, months, and days. Older cemeteries may have stones in German, but more modern ones are in English. At the cemetery, the grave has already been dug. There is no singing. Rather, a traditional hymn is read by the minister or bishop until the grave is filled by the pallbearers. The Lord's Prayer is prayed silently. Some of the Amish in attendance will return to the home for a simple meal. Let's go back to cheerier topics with one of the most famous Amish traditions. Amish carpentry. Carpentry crafts. Carpentry is one of the first things outsiders think of when the topic of Amish traditions is raised. The Amish certainly have a talent for woodwork, especially building barns. This trade is passed down from father to son, and it also serves as a lucrative income stream for many Amish communities. This is a trade that can be plied without the use of electrical tools. It certainly makes the task more difficult, but the Amish have honed these skills for generations. Most Amish don't use modern tools, and they stick with traditional crafts that they can do with hard labor and the use of hand tools. They also build schools, houses, and communal structures in their communities. These tend to be very simple and functional. The use of modern technology and electricity from the public grid are forbidden. This is their way of avoiding the temptations of outside life that can pose a threat to Amish culture. What do they eat? Amish cuisine. Amish cuisine is noted for its simplicity and traditional qualities. Food plays an important part in Amish social life and is served at potlucks, weddings, fundraisers, farewells, and other events. Many Amish foods are sold at markets including pies, preserves, bread mixes, pickled produce, desserts, and canned goods. Many Amish communities have also established restaurants for visitors. Amish meat consumption is similar to the American average, though they tend to eat more preserved meat. Amish cuisine is often mistaken for the similar cuisine of the Pennsylvania Dutch, with some ethnographic and regional variances, as well as differences in what cookbook writers and food historians emphasize about the traditional foodways and intertwined religious culture and celebrations of Amish communities. While myths about the diffusion of shoofly pie are common subject matter for studies of American cuisine, food anthropologists point out that the culinary practices of Pennsylvania Dutch and Amish are innovative and dynamic, evolving across time and geographic spaces, and that not all the Pennsylvania Dutch are Amish, and not all Amish live in Pennsylvania. Distinguishing local myths from culinary facts is accomplished by dedicated anthropological field studies in combination with studies of literary sources, usually newspaper archives, diaries, and household records. Stay tuned for more amusing traditions. Strange nicknames are one of the most amusing traditions of the Amish is their penchant for unusual and funny nicknames. These have an important purpose, though. The Amish aren't allowed to marry outside of their faith and community, and they often name their children after relatives. The Amish tend to have very large families, and this has led to an overabundance of particular names in each community. It's not uncommon for there to be several boys named John, or several girls named Mary, in one community. To solve the problem of everyone in the community responding when a name is called, nicknames had to be introduced. A common practice is to add the name of the parent onto the name, but when the child is named after their father, this only complicates the issue. This is how some very funny nicknames have resulted, for example, Double John. This isn't the only place the Amish can't see eye to eye with the outside world. Horse-buggy transport. Horse and buggy transport. Have you ever seen a family of Amish, speaking German, riding in a horse-drawn cart? For most non-Amish, the only time they've seen an Amish family is when they ride their horse and buggy along a country lane. The Amish don't own or operate motor vehicles. In fact, they are prohibited from doing so. There are different groups of Amish, and some are more progressive than others on this rule. When exceptions have been made to this rule, it's almost always in more progressive New Order communities. The Old Order, the most conservative of Amish communities, doesn't permit members of the community to own or drive cars. This tradition has nothing to do with their faith. It's linked to their staunch avoidance of relying on modern technology. The horse and buggy were the primary modes of transport of their founders. So, even to this day, Old Order Amish continue this tradition from the earliest Amish beginnings. Another strange tradition that outsiders can't understand is Rumspringa. One other Amish youth tradition that's very misunderstood is Rumspringa. Upon the age of 16, an Amish community member may be baptized into the faith. They may then marry and start a family soon after if they wish. However, they also believe that this should be a matter of choice. Every member of the community must make their decision freely and never be subject to coercion. Thus, the concept of Rumspringa was born. At this time, teenagers or young adults are allowed to experience the outside world, briefly. This way, they can be aware of what they are giving up and can make an informed decision. Should they decide that despite these modern experiences, they are happy to return to the Amish way of life, they may be baptized. Most Amish teenagers return to their communities. Now, let's look at the strange case of Amish weddings. Amish weddings are traditionally held on Tuesdays or Thursdays in later fall after the harvest. Amish wedding tradition has had to give way to practicality. Weddings are now held year-round and on other days to accommodate the number of couples getting married. Courtship among the Amish is more secretive. A couple won't announce their engagement until just a few weeks before their wedding. They keep it a secret, as long as they can. It is always an occasion for a new dress for the bride. They typically don't wear white but one of the more acceptable colors of their group. They take great care in choosing the fabrics and colors for their wedding party. The wedding party, called attendants in English ceremonies, are all dressed in the same dress color. The young men of the wedding party also wear matching shirts in some cases. At the least, they are the same color. The servers, who assist at the meal, also have special colors that the bride picks for them to wear. Ohio Amish country weddings are usually a time when English friends are invited to join, not so much in the service as in the meal following. Preparation for the meal requires lots of help from the community. That's because the meal usually serves 200 to 300 persons. A group of women will gather a day or two before the wedding to set up the tables in the house. This may necessitate that the wedding actually be held at a neighbor's place. The head table has places set for the wedding party and their attendants. This group could number up to 20. There are special napkins with the couple's names on them, pens with the date commemorated, and other favors. Because of the size of the group, a cooking tent is often set up to accommodate the portable stoves and food preparation areas needed for such large groups. Amish weddings are held during a service similar to the typical Amish worship service. The bishop and ministers preside. The couple takes their vows before the church. Afterward, the celebration continues with the meal. The Amish wedding meal is usually typical fare with fried or broasted chicken, hingle flesh, mashed potatoes, grum batter mush, gravy, and other vegetables. The typical foods at an Amish wedding have sparked a cottage industry in making Amish wedding foods. They can be found in some of the local markets. After the meal, in some groups, the bride and groom visit the wedding meal guests with baskets of candy to hand out as favors. This gives them an opportunity to greet all the guests personally. After the gifts are opened and the guests begin to thin, it is time for the evening meal. The first night crowd is usually much smaller by now. In some groups, the parents will give their newlyweds their first bedroom suite, handmade by the family or by another craftsman in the community. The young couple will typically sleep in the parents' home the first night. In some groups, the couple has to arise on the first morning of their married life and wash all their clothes together. This is where the jokesters of the couple's crowd of young people go to work. They might take the couple's bed out into a field along with a nightstand on which they would place a lantern so they could find it. They might hide the washing machine. Or they might come to serenade the couple to keep them awake. It's all in good fun. Many times, the couple will set up housekeeping with one of the parents until they can get on their feet and either buy, rent, or build a new home. The wife may continue to work part-time outside the home, continuing her cleaning business or working in a local establishment. But they soon retire to begin their family. These are just a few of the many Amish traditions that are often misunderstood and misrepresented by the non-Amish community. If you liked this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more amazing content like this.